And it's Lori, and welcome to the channel. So, in today's episode, I thought I'd take just a minute and walk you through editing the ink and flower images that I've been working on. So, if you follow or subscribe to my newsletter or follow me on social media, you've probably seen that I've been working on this personal project where I've been capturing flowers submerged in water and using ink to just give them this kind of magical look. Now, this is one of my images where I was testing everything kind of straight out of camera and I was playing with a different setup. So you can kind of see that there. So I have an entire video on my process. I'll link that below. But I thought today I had some fresh images that we would just walk through and edit together. It also is a great refresher video if you're looking for some editing tips. So today I'm in Lightroom and then I'll also be using Photoshop. So I wanted to just show you the before. This was the before image. So it's a little bit dark and of course a little hazy because it's filled with some ink in the water. The flower is actually in a cylinder with water. It's kind of smushed to the center or the front of the vase, but it is in water. So this is after I've made my basic edits. So if you look over here in the menu with me on the right, you'll see I increased the contrast a little, opened up the whites. I did a tone curve adjustment again to really pop those whites. I also adjusted my white balance because I was shooting with some lights. I also shot these with a flash, and so I needed to adjust that. I did some color adjustments, and I did not do anything to dehaze or clarity. Sometimes with these images, I do add a little dehaze, but for this one, I didn't feel like it was needed. Then if we come up to the mask, I did do a mask. So this is where I was masking the white ink. And what I wanted to do was just brighten it a little bit. So I did that there. Now, as far as cleanup, I did a few spots where I was doing some cloning and healing. But what I noticed with this image, one, you can see the edge of the vase. Two is all of this area up here. I wasn't happy with that. I also didn't like some of this reflection that I got. So I'm going to take this pre-edited image into Photoshop and I'll show you the changes there that I made and I'll walk you through a couple of my favorite tools. So let's jump over, and this is the image straight from Lightroom. So the first thing that I did is I duplicated my background layer and then I used the remove tool, which if we come over and grab that, you can use the remove tool to come in, and I cleaned up this edge with the remove tool. So really easy. You can see before and after. Now I did that versus cropping because I didn't want to crop the image too close. I really wanted this space, and so I used the remove tool to clean it up. Okay, so the next step, I started working on this area at the top. And this is where I used the clone tool, which is one of my favorite options to bring this smoky ink look over into this area. So I had to use the clone tool and I kind of worked and worked and worked on it using the clone tool to make those adjustments. Next, I went in and I actually wanted to blur that a little bit. So I felt that the clone was a little harsh. And so I came in and used a blur, and I believe for this one, I did blur, Gaussian blur. So I applied it, then I inverted my mask and I applied it just where I wanted it. So that was the next step that I did. Then I came in and you can see this is where I made the biggest impact to the image. So I did a 50% gray layer. So I'm going to show you that in just a second, but I'm going to walk you through the other edits that I made. So next, I did some additional cloning right here to really clean up those spots. And then I did a curves adjustment just to adjust. I'll show you that curve. Let's see if I can get it to pull up. There we go. So just pretty much did like an S curve to darken the shadows a little bit and brighten the highlights. And the last step where I was is I did apply a little bit of oil paint to the image. Now that's optional. I actually turned it off because I'm not sure that I love it. So let me go ahead and backtrack on this image. And I'm going to go back to all the way back to adding the blur. So I'm at the step in the image where I've cleaned up this, but I really want to soften that a little bit. So all I did was duplicate that layer, Command or Control J, and I'm going to go up to Filter, Blur, and apply the Gaussian blur. Now I've got it about 13 or 14%. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to click OK. And now my favorite thing to do is go ahead and add your mask. Click that. We want to do Command or Control I to invert it. At this point, you can flip it to white, grab your brush, and I'm going to reduce the opacity of the brush down to about 10-20% so that I can just softly start applying that. Now, with a low opacity brush, you can go over the area multiple times. So that's going to allow me to just get in there and soften that. Now, if there's other areas of the image that you want to give it a little bit of softness, maybe just around these edges, then you could do that. We can see in our mask where it's been applied. And so I'm just going to kind of come over and go over that again. And if I turn it on and off, you'll see before and after. I think it just suits the image. And the main thing is I didn't want to draw the viewer's eye to this area. I want it to stay right here in the center. Okay, so the next step is I added that 50% gray layer. So why would we want to do that? Well, there are options over here in Photoshop to burn or dodge, but those are destructive elements. And I personally don't think that they're as effective or as soft as using a 50% gray layer. So let me show you how to do it. You're going to come down to the plus sign and hold your Option key, and we are going to add a layer. You can also go up to New Layer if you want to in the Layer panel. Now, what you want to do is under Mode, we're going to select Overlay. This now tells you Fill with neutral color gray at 50%, and we're going to check that box. Next, you're just going to click OK. So now you've got this 50% gray layer. So what we're going to do is make sure you're on white, grab your brush. Again, I'd probably keep the opacity up pretty high, and we're still on that overlay mode. And now we can just gently impact the light in our image. Now, I like to keep it at 100% opacity on my layer, and I'm just going to pop some of this dodging around the area where I want to brighten it. And what we can do is once we finish, I'm just going to come in and just enhance these kind of areas. Once we finish, we can reduce the opacity down so that it looks really natural. And that's what I like to do with it. Just kind of like to come around. This is a little bit of like light painting. So we're just enhancing those areas, bringing out the detail where we want it. All right, now we can take the opacity on the layer. So I'm back over here in our layers panel, and I'm going to just lower that down to where it looks really natural. Now the center of the flower, I always like to make those pop a little more. So you can just go back over it a couple times to get that brightness exactly where you want it. Kind of stand back and look at it and make sure that you're happy with it. Again, you can always play with that opacity. All right, I'm going to brighten this guy just a little bit more. You do want to make your light look natural, so I don't want anything that looks too weird. I may pop just a little bit on that ink. Okay, so that's a 50% gray layer. Let me show you before. Pretty flat looking, and now after we've really enhanced and given it that beautiful pop of light. Now the next step that I did is I did a curves adjustment. So I'm going to come down to our adjustments and I'm going to select curves. And I like to use a curves adjustment sometimes at the end of my editing just to give it a little bit of a final tweak and just kind of play with that. I don't want to make it too dark. And let's just turn that on and off. It's definitely darkened our flower a little bit, and you just kind of have to play with it to see how you like it. So I think just a little bit is good. Now at this point, I realized that this flower still has a little bit of, there was a reflection there, I think. So I'm going to do a stamped layer. That is Command Option Shift and the letter E. That's going to give us a clean layer to work with. Now, at this point, what I'm going to do is grab my clone tool. Now, I'm using that instead of the remove because I really want to bring out the texture in this area. So I want to clone what is already here. So I'm going to select my Option key so that I have a target. And then I'm just going to start moving around. Now we do need to make sure our opacity is all the way up at 100%. And then just follow where your target is, that little X bar, to get the right area. So you can see how nice and neutral that looks. Now there's a little bit of a line here, and I don't want it to look, I don't really like that too much. So I'm going to cover that up as well. So we just kind of smoothed that out. Now, if you want to, at this point, I would probably want to go ahead and blur this. But I think what I want to do is add a little bit of this other color in. So I'm just kind of modifying this petal and adjusting it. And if you don't like something, you can just kind of get rid of it. Now, what we can also do is bring down the opacity. Just going to bring that up. I think I need to keep it all the way up. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and do a, let's go ahead and duplicate this layer, Command J. Now I'm going to do that filter, blur, Gaussian blur again. Click OK. Add our mask and invert it. And then we're going to grab our white brush. And I really just want a low opacity. And I'm just going to soften that. Let's make our brush a little smaller. I'm just going to soften that area, just to kind of blur that out so it matches the rest of the image. And I think I'm also going to soften this petal a little bit. All right, so if we look at those before, you can see that, and after. And if you're still not completely happy with it, I could also go back over it again. Let me target right there. See, let's keep, make sure which layer we're on. I think we need to go back to this one, and I'm going to just target it again. This is where I'm just getting kind of nitpicky, but I don't want this to be an ugly spot, so I just want to make sure that I get it as good as I can. So probably, let me lower this opacity. And then I'm just going to go over this area some more. So with cloning, sometimes it works the first time. Sometimes you have to go over and over it. So that's a little bit better. Let's go ahead and do another stamped layer, Command Option Shift and the letter E. And I'm going to try the remove tool. I'm just not sure that it's going to do what I want, but we'll try it. You never know. Click the checkbox, and we'll just give it a shot and see what it does. Too bad. Let's go ahead and do it one more time right there. Click the checkbox. Okay, that's better. I think at this point I'm happy with it. Probably try to clean that up just a little bit. And I think that's good because our flower's not supposed to be perfect there. So at this point, I think I'm pretty happy with this image. There are a couple other spots that I could clean up. Really, with an image like this shot underwater, you just have to decide how much you want to clean it up. Now, the reason that I was so particular with this is an image that I would like to print. And because of that, I don't want any kind of weird smudges or places that are distracting. So I want it to be really smooth and beautiful. Now, remember that last step of adding the oil paint is totally optional. It's something that you can do. That's under Filter, Stylize, and Oil Paint. All right, so that's a little bit about editing one of these magical images. If you're curious about how to shoot it, be sure to check out my other video as well as the link to my full complete resource guide. It's a completely free guide that's going to walk you through all my tips and tricks for this creative style of photography. Thank you so much for watching. Please take a minute to click like and subscribe. It sure helps me out and keeps me making these great videos for you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.